Chicago. You're listening to Cold Sweat Podcast with your host, Casey Diamond. Hey everyone, welcome back to Cold Sweat Podcast. I'm Casey Diamond, and today I have with me Chris Berg. Welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, do you want to describe your background really quickly so that we can give everybody a taste of what our episode will be about?
Sure. I have a business degree that I got probably about 20-something years ago, and I worked in that industry and really enjoyed it, and then decided to stay home and raise my two daughters. And once I raised them and got them off to college, I knew I wanted to do something else, but I really wasn't sure what it was. Mm-hmm. But I've always loved food, and I've loved everything about it. I like to cook, I like to grow some of my own food, and I like to just learn about nutrition and health. Mm-hmm. So I did some research to see what I could do to incorporate that in with the job, with the background I had, and found out that what I really needed to do was to go back to school to get my degree in dietetics and nutrition so that I would be able to sit for the exam to become a registered dietitian. So that's what I did. I went back to school about 4 years ago, and I just graduated in May of this year with a Bachelor of Science in dietetics and nutrition, and I will start an internship in September. In order to sit for the boards, you have to do an internship of 1,200 hours in a variety of hospital and school nutrition and community nutrition. And once you do the 1,200 hours, then you are able to sit to take your exam to become a registered dietitian. So I am on board to do that. I'll start that in September, and hopefully I'll have all my hours in by next year at this time.
Wow, that's so exciting.
Yeah, it is.
So we always start out our episodes by first talking about a class that I tried in the past week. And it's actually been a few weeks since I've recorded my last episode, so I've tried a lot of classes. So I had to think about what I really wanted to discuss. And I actually took a class the other day called Solid Core. Have you heard of it at all?
No, I haven't.
So it's similar to Pilates, or another studio in Chicago is called Studio Legree, and they use the reformer machine, and it is really tough. So I really love Pilates. I've been doing it since I was dancing, when my teacher would bring in like mat Pilates techniques to us to try in class. And so I was really interested in trying the reformer when I moved to Chicago. I've tried a few different variations of that type of class. Solid Core, it always has its own little niche, its own little techniques that they use that are different from everybody else. They call their reformer Sweatlana. And if that gives you any indication of like how scary and intimidating the class can be when you go in there. But they do, they make it user-friendly. So, and the same with Studio Legree. So it's very easy, like, okay, you're going to stand here and put your feet on line one, and then you're going to move the cage or the carriage back and forth. So they make it very approachable if you don't know Pilates. However, I will say one thing. My friend and I tried the beginner class. If you have no experience in Pilates, you have no experience in, like, you haven't been to a workout class in a really long time, that's a good place to start. If you have a solid background already, I wouldn't recommend taking that class, because it is 25 minutes of him talking and explaining the carriage and everything that goes along with it, and then 25 minutes of actual class. When you pay for a 50-minute class, that's kind of disappointing.
Sure.
So, but I will say, in that 25 minutes, I hurt, like in a good way. Like, I'm very sore still today. I got a great workout. I'm now somewhat scared to try the 15-minute class because it was very difficult, but I think that I still would have enjoyed it more if I had gotten the full experience, because in the 15-minute class, they have the lights down, the music up, it's more of that vibe, versus in the beginner class, they keep the lights up so that like they can be watching you more and all that. So I don't think I needed that, but I mean, I can see why it would be helpful.
Did you get any help from was there just one instructor for the whole class, or was there an instructor for each person?
So there was one instructor for the whole class. It wasn't, the class itself, it does have limited space. I would say there was maybe no more than like 10 to 15 reformers in the room. So that means that there was only 10 to 15 people. I mean, and they weren't even like completely filled. So I would say there was like 8 of us in the class because it was a beginner class. And they're fairly new to Chicago. So I just learned of it a few weeks ago. So I'm excited to go back and try another class. But I mean, I will say I'm still sore. So
it's fun to try the new classes. It keeps you motivated.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
So now we'll get into talking more about nutrition and food. And so I think based on kind of our preparation for this episode, we really wanted to talk about like bad diets and, you know, your approach to food and dieting. So first, we'll talk about what is your dieting rules? What do you follow in your own life and what sort of practices do you take?
Well, since I've gone through the education, I have looked at it totally different. I try to eat in moderation. There are no foods that I will not allow myself to have. Now, I do know that there are some foods that, of course, are going to, have a lot more calories in them and a lot more fat and sugar. But if I enjoy them, I do pay attention to, how often I'm eating them. And I will try to eat like a small portion and try to enjoy that as much as I can and not to deprive myself of it. Because I know in the past when I've deprived myself of things and I've noticed with other people, you just go hog wild and then you just eat so much of it and then you get mad at yourself. So if you allow yourself those things that you want in moderation, then that doesn't happen. So I try to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, and I know sometimes that's hard to do, when you're eating, 3 meals a day or even just 2 meals a day with a snack. So I try to sneak as many veggies into all my meals as I can, and I think the secret to that is keeping them on hand. Because if we don't have them around, then they're hard to eat.
I have to say, the one thing that I always crave is sugar. And I know I have a major addiction to it. And so I feel like I keep seeing different articles and different things about like what you should be eating, like which types of sweeteners, and I'm very confused, and there's a lot out there. So I guess based on your education and based on your knowledge, what sugars and sweeteners are good, quote unquote, good for you, and which ones should you really avoid?
Well, I think it's funny because the media will try to say, like, if it's natural, like honey or something like that, or agave, well, then it's fine to eat. But it's still sugar. So sugar's sugar. Whether it's table sugar, whether it's honey, whether it's agave, it's still sugar. Yeah. So we all like sugar. I mean, I don't think that, some people just don't like it. I think we all like it. But I also think the more we eat it, the more we're going to want to, crave it. I know that the sweeteners, the artificial sweeteners, a lot of times will get a bad rap. But I was just reading something recently where there's been, research done on it saying that the artificial sweeteners are fine, So I think that if you feel guilty about eating too many sweets, you can substitute them with the artificial sweeteners if you want. I try to stay away from the artificial sweeteners myself. I have them a little bit in moderation every once in a while. I might add them to like my iced tea. Okay. But not a lot. I drink my coffee without the sugar, and I don't really like to use artificial sweeteners in baking. I have tasted it before. Sometimes it's okay, and then other times I've noticed it kind of gives you that aftertaste that I don't really like. Yeah. So I like to just use good old sugar. But, try to, maybe save my desserts and my sweets, in moderation, maybe, occasionally and not every day. Yeah.
I'm curious because a lot of, I'm thinking about, like, in my office, we now have Coke Zero. And Coke Zero is now Coke Zero Sugar. And they say they have no sugar, but I think there might be, like, stevia in it or something. Is that, I guess, what, like, category would you put that into?
Well, stevia is a plant.
Okay.
So I would say that's a type of sugar. I mean, it's...
Okay. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I really learned recently that I guess never really occurred to me is that a lot of carbs, or I guess all carbs, are sugars. Is that true, or am I mixing that up?
No, it's glucose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I try to stick to sugar in moderation, but then I also, I have cereal every morning or something, and I'm trying to keep my sugar down, and I realize, wait a minute, did I just eat all sugar all day?
Well, there's different types. I mean, so when you're eating carbohydrates, there's simple, there's complex, there's starches, and your body breaks them down differently and stores them. So it's not, I think when you're thinking of sugar, don't think of it as like table sugar.
Yeah.
You know, it is glucose, and you can look on your packages, and it'll tell you how many sugars are in there. And we were going to have new labels, and some companies already started putting the labels out before it was going to be had to be effective. It was actually this summer, July of 2018. Now they've switched it with our new president, so they don't have to do that anymore. So you're not going to see people changing to that. But like I said, a lot of companies have already done it. And on the new labels, it'll say on the back of it, it'll not only say the sugar, but it'll also say the added sugar.
Okay.
So you know what's been added to that food in addition to what's in there naturally.
Okay.
And a lot of times they'll add it, you know, to keep it more, you know, shelf stable.
Okay.
And, you know, or maybe to make it a little sweeter. So you can really, you know, the label of food gives us so much information. So knowing how to read that label is extremely helpful.
And I have this question sort of in my game going up, but I guess what should you really be looking for on a nutrition label? I know that's kind of a broad question, and I guess it kind of depends on your own dietary goals.
Right.
But I guess, well, I'll throw this question in now. So what are like 3 things that would be important for you to look at on a nutrition label?
For me personally?
Yes.
Okay.
For you personally.
Because someone, you know, that's gluten intolerant would be totally different. So for me, I guess the first thing I look at is I want to, what's a portion considered? Is it 15 crackers or is it 3 crackers?
Yeah.
Or is it 1 cookie or is it 5 cookies?
Yeah.
Or is it, you know, a half a cup or a cup and a half? So I always look at the serving size because that's going to tell me a lot right there. Like how many of this can, you know, how many of these things can I eat? And then I'll look at maybe how many grams of fat are in there, you know, and what types of fat. Is it saturated fat? Is it poly? Is it mono? You know, so that tells me a lot right there. And then sometimes if I really want to know, I'll look at the ingredients. So the ingredients are listed. So whatever the first ingredient is, that's the most of what that product is made of. And then it goes down in succession.
Yeah.
So as it goes down, then it's the second most and the third most.
Okay. So I know, so you threw a lot of information out there, and I know we don't have nearly enough time to talk about all of it. But as far as like poly, mono, unsaturated fat, like where is the best place for listeners to kind of get more resources so that they can do their own research and kind of learn what they should be looking for in a nutrition label?
When you want to look up things on the internet, you always want to go to reliable sources. And I feel like the most reliable sources for people to look at are, first of all, to go to .org. So if, say, they were looking at fat, they would maybe want to go to the American Heart Association, you know, and that's going to give them a lot of information on fats and which ones are healthy and which ones are better for you and what they do to your body. So anything with an org in it, any kind of an organization, .org is extremely helpful. And I personally like to look at the Mayo Clinic. I think I can get some really good, substantial information from that resource. I would stay away from Wikipedia. That is, you know, because anybody could put any information on that. So I would stay away from that. And I would also be a little leery of just people you know, writing articles. You know,
that's what I was going to bring up too, because I subscribe to a lot of newsletters and I'm reading them all day long. And I take their articles as like Bible sometimes. You know, I'll be like, okay, I can't eat that anymore, but then it's like now I have no sugars that I can eat anymore.
Right.
So I mean, there is a lot of information, and I guess if you were reading an article from somebody, what sort of credentials could you be looking for that would know that they are more than just a journalist doing a little bit of research?
Well, I guess it would depend on what they're writing about. So if someone's going to be writing about heart healthy, I would want to make sure it's a cardiologist or maybe a registered dietitian or someone that has the credentials that could talk about that with a lot of credibility. There's just so many magazines out there, and you know, so many health magazines, and even myself when I'm taking, you know, different exercise classes, because I like to do those too, and I like to really mix them up so that I stay motivated. I notice a lot of times after we finish the exercise class, the instructor is giving out information, and so often I sit there and think to myself, oh my gosh, that is not true. You know, and it's really frustrating for me because, you know, I don't say anything, but so you just have to be really careful. You know, there's all kinds of people that are wanting to give you the information, and then I always question those people. Well, where did they get that information? You know, So it's kind of nice that you know, to get it from someone that has the credentials, the initials behind their name.
Yeah.
You know, that makes them
Yeah, that makes
credible.
sense.
Yeah.
So going back to carbs for a second, because I really wanted to talk about the fad diets, and obviously the biggest fad diet out there is cutting out carbs, and people think that that's the answer to everything. So I guess I wanted to know your opinion on that and like what that really does for your body, because I know, and like including myself, like when I cut out carbs or like definitely limit the number of carbs that I'm eating, I do see a difference in my body. However, like, is that sustainable? Is that something that is part of you can still have a balanced meal and do that?
Well, carbs provide us with energy. So energy is a really important thing, and they recommend that your diet half of your diet consists of carbs. Healthy carbs, of course, but carbs no less. So, you know, anytime you cut out anything and you restrict yourself, you're setting yourself up to get into binge eating, you know, because anytime we say, okay, I'm not going to have this, I'm not going to have this, and then you go so long, and then finally you're like, oh, I can't do this anymore, and you give in, and then you end up beating yourself up, and then you end up feeling bad about yourself, and it's just kind of a vicious circle. So so often people think of carbs too as bread. Well, carbs are in all kinds of food. They're in our vegetables. They're in our fruit. They're in all, you know, they're in almost everything. So
I think I definitely, when I talk about carbs, I'm thinking about like bagels.
right. You know, and so that once again, you go back and you're like, okay, look at our serving size. You know, what is a serving size of a bagel? Well, really big bagels that you get, a serving size is a fourth of that.
Oh my gosh.
So I think it's kind of a, you know, educating yourself as to eating things in moderation and teaching yourself what a serving is. So you can still have that bagel, but when you know what a serving size is, it's a fourth of the bagel, then you're like, okay, well then I'll eat a fourth of it. Then you feel like, okay, well, I still had what I wanted, but I had it in a serving size, which is an appropriate amount. Yeah. So that you're not, you know, then all of a sudden you're like, I'm not going to eat bagels, and you eat 5 of them.
And I think some people confuse cutting out carbs with cutting out gluten too, and so that's another thing I really, really wanted to discuss, because I am kind of the person that when I hear somebody is gluten-free and they have no reason to be gluten-free, I kind of eye roll a little bit, because it, like, gluten is a great thing in my opinion. Right. And as somebody who had to go gluten-free for a while for health reasons, and then I learned that was not the issue and I had to do other things, I, like, first of all, I appreciate it so much more, but second of all, I don't see the point of cutting out gluten unless there is a health reason. I think that some people also maybe just have, you know, maybe it's in their head or maybe it's not in their head, but what is the benefit of going gluten-free if you don't need to go gluten-free?
There are no benefits. Because, I mean, like, unless you have your celiac, you know, disease, or either if you have a celiac intolerance, you shouldn't go gluten-free, because a lot of the foods that have gluten in them are also fortified. They're fortified with a lot of vitamins and minerals, and especially a lot of B vitamins, which we need. So when you're not eating those foods, you're not allowing yourself to have all that fortification of these B vitamins. And then also the fiber that's in there. You know, as Americans, we don't eat nearly enough fiber. So when we're cutting out the whole wheat and we're cutting out that's some good sources of fiber that we could be having in our diet. And then the other thing is, a lot of times on the gluten-free foods, they have a lot more fat and sugar in them. And I don't think people realize that. And they have those extra fats and sugars in them so that they'll taste good. And then also to make the product stand up and to make it, you know, shelf stable. So I think if they knew that, they would be like, oh my gosh, they're just, I think a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going to lose weight if I go gluten-free.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is. And maybe they're eating more salads, but I promise you, like, there's probably gluten in their dressings that they're eating, or something. Like, there's so many other places where there is gluten, where people who say they're gluten-free but don't need to be gluten-free don't realize it, and so they're not really doing the diet, and they're not.
There's even gluten in some medications.
Oh, really?
Yes, and our toothpaste. I mean, it's in places where you would not, like you just said, would not realize. You know, they just think bread. No, it's like in soy sauce.
Soy sauce, yeah.
It's
and you think like sushi
things.
is gluten-free, but it's not all of a sudden.
Right. There's a lot. It's hidden in so many places. And I know for someone that really does have the sensitivity, they have to be so careful, because even though it might say it's gluten-free, it's made someplace in a plant where it's touching other things that have the gluten in them, which then really can cause them a lot of suffering, and a lot of problems. So, unfortunately, if you do have that problem, your world all of a sudden changes pretty drastically.
So you are gluten-free, or you have a sensitivity?
Oh, no, I don't.
Oh,
no,
okay.
I don't. No, but just in school, we had to learn about it. And I had a project where I had to, I had to follow a gluten-free diet for a week.
Really?
Yes, just so I could learn, what that's like for someone. And all of a sudden, it just opened up the whole world. Like, oh my gosh, I had to be really careful, about everything that I was doing and putting in my mouth and looking at the ingredients and making sure. And I had no idea before that.
Yeah, and I wonder too. Let me know if you think this is heading in the right direction. But obviously a lot of American foods are very overprocessed, and that might be where the stomach troubles are coming from even more than the gluten, because I've heard stories of people who go to Italy and eat pasta where it's all fresh and not as processed, and they're completely fine, and then they come back here and they can't touch it because they just get so upset. And I'm wondering if that's true in your opinion, or
I don't really know.
Yeah.
I do know that out there, so many people, so many things have come up, in the past 10, 20 years that you didn't see, 30, 40 years ago, and you're seeing it now. And I know a lot of people are saying, is that because of the food being so processed? Is it because of the pesticides? There's so many questions, right? Yeah. So I don't really know.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting industry to be in
now,
I'm sure.
It's a hot topic. Yeah.
So then another fad diet that I've gotten a lot of questions on is intermittent fasting. So do you want to explain what that is to the listeners, and also kind of the process of it, and any of the benefits that you might see from that?
Sure. Well, intermittent fasting is another huge thing that's going on right now, and there has been a lot of research on it, and they have found that it does work, but it depends on how you do the intermittent fasting. So you don't want to do intermittent fasting where you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to eat today until 10 o'clock tonight. I'm going to fast all day. Well, that's almost impossible. And if you do that, then all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, and you go crazy and you start eating everything, that you can get your hands on. But what they have found that does work really well, and people have been very successful with it. I know my two daughters do this, and they've had, really good success with it, is say you eat your last meal at 7 o'clock at night. You don't eat again until maybe the next day at noon. So now you've been fasting for, 15 hours, and you can do it, or 16 hours, because you're sleeping a good part of that time, and you're not burning the calories. You're not needing that energy to, go to work out, go to school, do whatever you're doing. Okay. So it's much easier to do because you're not requiring that. But trying to wake up in the morning and not eat until 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night is not, people don't have the success with it, and it doesn't make as much sense as trying to do it.
I guess my issue of grappling with this is that I've always been told breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So how can that be true, and also not eating quote unquote breakfast or breaking the fast until half of my workday is done?
I understand what you're saying, because I've heard the same thing. I think you have to listen to your body. I think, once again, you have to be in touch with your body and listen to it, and kind of goes back to the mindful eating. So if you wake up in the morning and you feel really hungry, you should eat. Yeah. You should definitely eat. But, some people can wake up in the morning and they can have a cup of coffee or water or whatever, and they're not hungry yet. I know myself, when I first wake up in the morning, I can't eat when I first wake up because I just don't have any desire. It almost makes me kind of, but by 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm ready to eat now. Yeah. And then I'll eat. But I don't, or maybe I think you have to listen to your body. And I think it probably depends a lot on what you had to eat the day before.
Yeah. Also, I think from what I've heard from probably not reliable sources, but it's also plan your eating window around when you're planning on working out, and when you're planning on, or when you're going to be hungry, essentially. So just to reiterate what you said.
Right. But I think it's also a personal thing. I know myself personally, I have to eat something before I work out, because if I don't, my blood sugar drops and I hit the wall and I do not get a good workout. So if I'm going to work out pretty early in the morning, even though I normally don't eat that early in the morning, I will eat something small, usually a carbohydrate of some kind with some fiber in it, because otherwise I'm wasting my time, my money, and my energy when I go to that workout. I'm not going to get what I want out of it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because also I've noticed that I've been having trouble going to the higher intensity classes because I'm not planning my diet around that class, which you really have to be doing if you're going to be like, running a lot or doing anything like high intensity. And it's caused me some trouble in classes where I'm dragging behind. It's like, why am I even here? And so I've really struggled with figuring out what to put in my body before a workout like that.
A lot of times I'll have maybe a whole piece of toast with a little peanut butter on it, and that's perfect. So it's not too much to where like oh, your stomach is too heavy and you can't move around like you want to, but just something in there to give you that boost of energy that you need.
Peanut butter has definitely been my savior.
I bet. Yeah.
All right, well, we will move into our listener questions then really quickly. So we have 2 today. The first one is from my friend who was a vegetarian for a really long time, and she's also dairy-free. And she kind of had a similar issue as to what we were discussing before with carbs and cutting out or not having that like source of energy. So she says that when she was keeping vegetarian, it was either she was sticking really quote-unquote healthy and eating salads, but she also felt very low energy, or she'd be eating a big bowl of pasta and not feeling like she was staying as healthy as she wanted to be, but she would have more energy. So her question was, how can she create a balanced meal when she is cutting out protein and also dairy?
Well, she can get her sources of protein other ways. So she could get her protein from nuts. That's a good source of protein. The peanut butter that you talked about, she could get it from that. But another, the thing is, like when she's just eating the salad and just the veggies a lot, she's going to burn those up really quickly, and then probably an hour later go, wow, I'm hungry again. So a really good thing to add to that would be like lentils and beans, because she's going to get protein from that, and she's going to get fiber, and that's a good stain. That's going to stay with her longer. And then also add some healthy fats, like the avocado or the olive oil and things like that. Adding those healthy fats really gives you a lot of staying power. It's going to make you feel full a lot longer, so you're not going to be all of a sudden an hour later going, okay, I'm hungry again. I feel like I just ate, and now I need to eat again.
All right, and then my second listener question is about my other friend, who wants to start a plant-based diet. However, she thought the best way to approach this would be to do like plant-based during the week and then eat whatever she wanted on the weekends. So her question was, is this beneficial, or is the only way to get the benefits to do it full-time, I guess?
No, I think it's beneficial. The more vegetables and the more fruits that you can eat and get into your body, the better off you're going to be. It's going to keep you healthy. It's going to make your body work to its fullest potential. So I think that's really a great way to do it. So she's not feeling like she's depriving herself once again.
Yeah.
And she might see that she likes it. She might see, this isn't going to work for me. But anytime you can get a lot of fruits and vegetables in your diet is always a good thing. And I think to be conscious of it. I mean, even I have to be conscious of it to try to, get several in every day, because it's easy not to.
Yeah.
And when you don't have them around and you don't plan, like I have to go to the grocery store several times a week and have those on hand in the refrigerator and having them, fresh. It's really, really easy to not eat them.
Yeah, and so I'm even wondering if it's even more beneficial to do it that way, because when you know that you have a day where you're going to be able to eat that meat again, or eat whatever, it might even be easier to stick to it versus like, because whenever I'm on a diet, it feels like, oh, I'm never gonna have bagels again, and so then you want it even more.
Exactly. It's human nature. We always want what we can't have.
I know.
Yeah, so that's why moderation's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you're not depriving yourself of anything, and you're really enjoying food and everything it has to offer.
Yeah, and I think that's a major thing, is that people, or a lot of people who, think about diets and talk about diets all day, they lose the enjoyment of eating food and being a foodie and, you know, doing all that. And so...
Yeah, and there's actually been a lot of research done on diets don't work.
Yeah.
You know, they really don't. So people go on a diet and they will, you know, deprive themselves of this, that, and the other, and then they lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds, and then they go back, you know, to maybe even eating more of those things, you know, that they couldn't allow themselves, and they end up gaining the weight back and maybe even sometimes more weight than what they even had before. So the healthiest thing is just to eat things in moderation. And, you know, the real trend now is mindful eating. Yeah. You know, and taking the time to eat your food and eat it slow and really enjoy it and think about, you know, what it tastes like and and the experience, as opposed to starving yourself and then all of a sudden you've inhaled so much food and you look at your plate like, I just ate all that, I didn't even know what I ate.
Yeah, and doesn't that also, I've heard, like, you shouldn't really be eating while you're watching TV or, you know, while you're doing other things, because you don't really pay attention to how much you're putting into your body, like, to the point where you don't realize that you're full because you don't remember it.
Well, exactly. And if you're eating something out of a box, you have no idea, especially if you're watching TV or you're reading a book or you're talking on the phone, you have no idea how much you put in. That's why looking at that label and taking that portion out and saying, okay, so it's 25 crackers, and you put 25 in front of you and you eat them, then you're like, okay, I'm full now. Yeah. Or the nuts, or, you know, whatever it is you decide to eat.
There you go. So we're going to finish off with our game today. So it's started off as the game of things, but you need more people to play that game, and then so now it's just the game of 3 things. Okay. So I'm going, and also in this game, just know that I'm representing kind of the masses of people who don't know much about nutrition. I got a C in my nutrition course in college, unfortunately. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna list, like, name 3 blank, and I'm gonna say it as what I think it is, and then you can let me know how you would answer that question. Okay. So the first one would be 3 foods to keep in your fridge or pantry at all times. So what I would say for that is I always keep eggs in my fridge. I always keep, well, now I talked about this in an earlier podcast, but I've come around to peanut butter recently, so I always have peanut butter now. And I would say the third thing that I always keep around is LaCroix.
Oh, that's a good thing. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That way you get your water in.
Yeah. I stay hydrated.
Yeah. You know what? Those are 3 great things to keep.
Perfect. Yeah. What would you say? Any top 3 things for you, or?
Well, eggs and protein are both really good sources of protein. Yeah. So, you know, that's a good thing to have. The peanut butter is great, but you kind of have to watch your portion size. Yeah. Because I think a portion is 2 tablespoons. Okay. Isn't it? Yeah. I'm pretty sure, yeah. So that's like 200 calories. Yeah. And then that's real easy to just kind of slap that on some bread, or
I try to imagine what a tablespoon would be. Yeah. Sometimes it's tougher. I also, and from what I've learned about, like, reading the nutrition labels, you should look at, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you should look at the amount of calories in a serving, and then also how much protein is actually in that serving, and kind of compare it that way for peanut butter. I don't know if you would do it other ways, and then also sugar.
Yeah, but most peanut butters are pretty much the same. Okay. You know, relatively the same. Yeah. So, you know, I would just try to look at the portion of it, you know, and, you know, keep to that, because it's so easy to really pile it on there, you know. But I think those are 3 great things. The only thing you didn't have any fruits or vegetables in there, so I would, you know, maybe say, you know, keep apples on hand, or berries are great because they're really low in sugar.
Yeah, you should be so proud of me, because I actually have apples and berries in my fridge right now. Good. Yeah. I do like to keep those, but as a person who lives alone and I'm only one person, it's hard for me to finish a whole container of strawberries before they go bad, usually, or something like that. So that's why I really don't keep them in my pantry as much, but I do wish I would.
Well, what I would suggest for that, because my girls are gone, they're grown, and so it's just my husband and I. So we kind of have, with 2 people, it can be the same thing. So like I said, I always try to keep, like, blueberries or strawberries or raspberries on hand, depending on what the prices are, you know, at that time. But if I start noticing them just getting a little too ripe, what I'll do is I will first of all, don't wash them until you're going to eat them, because that's going to keep them staying fresher for a lot longer. But I keep Ziploc bags, freezer on hand, and I'll wash them and I keep them in my freezer. So then when I want to make my smoothies, then I've got my fruit, and then I'm not wasting it because it's expensive.
Yeah, I do always have like frozen fruit on hand for smoothies, because I do love smoothies, and it doesn't go bad when it's in the freezer. As far as I'm concerned,
no,
it
doesn't.
Fine.
It doesn't. Yeah. So if you start seeing the things that you buy getting to that point, just throw them in a freezer bag. Yeah. Then that way you're not wasting them.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, so 3 sources of quote unquote good fats. So I would say avocado and nuts, and I want to say I've heard a lot about ghee recently. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, it's butter. It's butter.
Yeah, it's
with
butter
the water.
with
it's saturated, but it's a saturated fat, so I wouldn't say that's.
It's just that's for like keto, right? That's what they eat for keto.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
What would you say for?
Avocado is great. That's a great source of a healthy fat, and your nuts are also. With the nuts, so you kind of want to look at your serving size, and see how many are in a serving size, because that's another thing that's real easy to just sit in front of the TV and just pound down a cup of almonds or cashews or whatever.
Yeah.
The third thing I would say is olive oil.
Oh, I forgot about the oils. And like coconut oil is a big one right now, but I know that's kind of controversial.
Yeah,
actually.
it is. And there's not a lot of so that's more of a saturated fat too.
Yeah.
So I would go with the extra virgin or just olive oil would be my third.
3 healthy items to look for on a menu when you're eating out.
A pasta is good as long as it's not made in a cream sauce that has a lot of fat in it. So maybe made with olive oil, or maybe a red sauce, tomato red sauce. And then I would look for if I'm going to order meats or fish, I would not get them fried. And anytime you see crispy on a menu, that means they're fried.
Yeah.
So I would.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah, I know. So I would go like with grilled. Yeah. Grilled, baked. And I would look for that. And then the third thing, I would say I was going to order, let's say, a salad. Yeah. I would look to see what's in that salad. Are they putting a ton of cheese in that salad and a lot of nuts? Dried fruit, because dried fruit has a lot of sugar in it.
So you shouldn't look for salads with nuts in it?
No, I would get them, but I would see how much is in there.
Oh, okay. And
get my salad dressing on the side, Yeah. And just see, because some of those salads can just be loaded with cheeses and nuts and and all of a sudden you're like, it's not healthy anymore. Yeah. So I would look for a salad that has, maybe some grilled meat in it and a lot of veggies with a few of those things in there. And maybe not a lot of croutons.
There you go. One of my things was 3 things to include in a salad, and I think we talked about way more than that. So 3 sources of protein. So I know from my nutrition class that I all but failed that egg is like the number 1 protein. Also meat, chicken, tofu. I'm gonna say those are my 3.
So those are good sources of protein. And then for the meats, I would stick with lean meats. Okay. Turkey, chicken, those types of meats.
All right, well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining.
Oh, great. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Where can people email you if they have any follow-up questions about today's episode?
Okay, I would love to answer any questions that I can for anyone, but let me just reiterate again that I am not a registered dietitian at this time. I do have a Bachelor of Science in Dietetics and Nutrition, and I will be starting an internship in September. And next year at this time, I hopefully should be ready to take my exam, and I will then be a registered dietitian nutritionist. But as of right now, I have the undergrad in that, and I would love to answer any questions to the best of my knowledge or point people in the right direction to answer those questions, but just wanted to make sure that it was clear. Yeah. So my email is cdeclerkberg@gmail.com. So it's cdeclerkberg@gmail.com.
Perfect. And you can follow Cold Sweat Podcast at Cold Sweat Podcast. And if you have any listener questions, Our email is coldsweatpodcast@gmail.com. And make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you rate us because we need ratings. And tune in next week. Thanks. Bye.